to see with the Make Volume 89 launch party, from handheld console hacking to giving old PCs state-of-the-art superpowers. We find new delight in old gear, plus a modern spin on a 19th century optical drawing aid and an easy way to add polyphonic audio to your creations. Got a couple plugs I need to do before we get started on all of that. The first one is the launch party is for Make Volume 89. This is Make Volume 89. It's available on newsstands, and so you can pop into your local Barnes & Noble, or you can also pick it up from the Maker Shed, makershed.com, or subscribe at make.co, that's .co, not .com. We also have a new website, or at least a refresh of a website that we just launched called makerspace.com. We've got, I'm not sure what the statistics are, we've got a lot of makerspaces on there, including my makerspace, All Hands Active, is on there with all of our information up to date. So take a look at that. If you're part of a makerspace, if you run a makerspace, get on there, get your information on there, and make sure that you're up to date. I just got a message that you can't hear me. Can anybody hear me? Can somebody else, can Jamie or somebody tell me if you can hear me real quick? Okay, Ian says, okay, not sure what that was, but seems like everything's okay. In addition to makerspace.com, I wanted to, okay, it sounds like just one person was having a problem with the audio. Please join us on our Discord server. The format of this show is that we have a panel discussion where each of our guests come forward for 15 minutes to talk about what they contributed to the magazine this issue. And after each of those 4 guests have given their little 15-minute overview of their work and their project and their process, we will move into the after party, which is a Zoom room, a little bit different than this right here. This is a webinar, so we can sort of talk at people, and you can chat to us and we'll see your chat. And if you're on YouTube or Facebook, we'll see your comments on there. But if you are a member and you are registered for the event and you are attending via Zoom, we'll head over to the after party Zoom room. And then if you're comfortable, you can turn your camera on, turn your mic on, not all at the same time, please. And you can ask questions of our guests directly. And then I mentioned the Discord, which I pasted a link to in the Zoom chat. If you hop on the Discord, we'll also be available on there, you know, perhaps in perpetuity. If you have a question you think of tomorrow or something, you can at me, or some of our guests are on there and you can ask them questions too. That's about it for the things that I needed to plug. And now let me introduce our 4 amazing guests and contributors real quick. First of all, Ian Scott. He wrote the piece about Pico Gus, which you will learn all about in just a moment here. Ian's a longtime tinker, maker, and generalist software developer with a day job in the robotics space. At night, he lives the dream of making retro hardware more usable and accessible through open source hardware and software. Next up after Ian is Kat Grafam, who made the Game Boy Camera Gallery Mystery Show game that we'll be diving into after that. And Kat is an artist and educator from Portland, Maine. She's obsessed with old technology, which is very appropriate for this retro issue, and creates videos, games, photographs, and paintings inspired by it. Oh, and she always lands on her feet. After Kat, we'll have Pablo Garcia, who did a piece on the camera Lucida, which is a project that, well, the Neo Lucida is the project that he created. Pablo is an associate professor at the School of Art Institute of Chicago, where he researches the history of drawing technologies. Since 2013, he's manufactured the Neo Lucida, a modern camera Lucida. We'll explain what that means, don't worry. He loves to draw and wants to encourage more people to enjoy putting pencil to paper. And finally, David Bettino is going to be telling us how to jam polyphonic audio into all kinds of weird stuff. He's the co-author of The Art of Digital Music and writes the popular Synths Hack column for Waveform. With his wife Hazuki, he also self-publishes Japanese storytelling books, which they have performed at 4 Maker Fairs. We should have plugged Maker Faire as well. Maker Faire Bay Area early bird tickets, I believe, are any day now. Early bird pricing expires on that. So go to makerfaire.com and grab your Maker Faire Bay Area tickets and check out other Maker Fairs in your area. All right. I believe we got through all of that and my voice is still kind of holding up. So let's have someone else talk for a little while. I gave Ian a little intro a moment ago, but his project is the Pico Gus. I actually have one right here. It is well, I'll let him tell you, but it's a Raspberry Pi Pico based sound card for retro computers. Welcome, Ian.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And Ian, I got a little surprise here. I don't want to like start beef or whatever, but just before we came on live here, I grabbed the coolest audio board that I could find, which is the Pro Audio Spectrum 16.
Yeah, it's all right, but it's not a Gus. It's just not a Gus.
Well, tell us about the Gus and the Pico Gus and
yeah. Yeah, so I've got one right here. Just like you, I just happen to keep old sound cards just, at arm's reach to put on a live stream. This is the red and glorious Pico Gus, designed in Canada, which might have something to do with the fact it's bright red. And it came out in 1992, and it was kind of a revolutionary card for like your standard PCs that ran DOS, so PC clones. And it was pretty groundbreaking in that it had a chip on it that would let you kind of play up to 32 kind of samples at the same time, and it had 1 MB of memory on board to store those samples in. And like those are like features that were like in like professional like sampling, like samplers and sampling keyboards and stuff like that. And to have it available on a PC at, I don't remember what the price point was, like maybe like $150, was actually pretty amazingly like it was groundbreaking. It never really took off though, because it wasn't quite like what your Sound Blaster was. So a lot of game companies didn't really do it right. They didn't do it justice. They didn't really do everything that you need to do to really get the best out of it. But there were a few that did. Another thing that really took the Gravis ultrasound to heart, and partially was because a lot of people got free cards from Gravis, the company that made this, was the demo scene. And the demo scene is mostly focused in Europe. And you start off as people making art on PCs, kind of showing off. Originally started off in the software cracking scene, where they remove the protection from a game and play a little intro before it to show off. It's like, hey, look at us, we're the best. And those kind of intros grew into full-fledged demos. Full, like it started like on the Commodore 64 and then the Commodore Amiga, and it made its way to the PC world. And on the PC world, yeah, there's an Amiga 100, right, 1000 right there. In the PC world, like the Gravis ultrasound meshed really well, because actually the way it made sound was actually pretty similar to the Amiga, but instead of having 4 channels of sound, it had 32. So people that were used to kind of tracker music, these music, I kind of like to call it like writing music on a spreadsheet. You've got these rows and columns where every row is a step through time and every column is a different channel of music.
I've got one right here, LSDJ.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tracker on a cartridge. Yeah. Yeah, so the Gravis ultrasound was like a really big thing in the demo scene, not so much in games, and just kind of went away. So they didn't sell a whole lot of them. But then nowadays, with a lot of people getting into retro computing again, they're like, oh, and a lot of it is like getting into stuff they didn't have the opportunity to get back in the day. It's like it was either too expensive or it's too obscure. And so the demand for these Gravis ultrasound cards is just crazy. So people have a really hard time finding these things. And if they get them on eBay, they're like a couple hundred, $300, $400, and it's kind of crazy. So I got a weird idea from watching a couple of live streams where it's like they're into this retro hardware and stuff. and they don't really have the opportunity to get these things just because they're priced out or they just can't even find them. And this was like my first kind of big kind of hardware project was to just start with a Raspberry Pi hooked up to an ISA bus and just playing around. And I got something kind of working like super early on. Like it was one of those strange, kind of weirdly blessed projects where it's like everything went perfectly to start. And if it hadn't gone perfectly, due to the fact I didn't know anything about what I was doing, I would have been like, I don't know anything about this. I must be too dumb, or I must not know enough. This is out of my league. I'm going to leave this to someone else. But like, I got over that hump, where it's like the flywheel started turning, whereas like I started learning more and more. And eventually what happened was I came up with the Pico Gus, which you already showed yours. And yeah, a few different versions of it. This is the most recent version. Yeah, and it's a card. It plugs into a PC and it emulates. It first started off emulating the ultrasound, the Gravis ultrasound, the Gus. But then, due to the fact it's got a Raspberry Pi RP2040 microcontroller on it, the first version had an actual Raspberry Pi Pico on it. That's why it's called the Pico Gus. You can emulate anything on it as long as, I mean, it's a microcontroller. It's not the most powerful thing in the world. You've got people saying, "Oh, you're plugging something more powerful than the computer into this computer." You got an old 46 or Pentium, and this thing's like 10 times or 100 times more powerful. Like, yeah, that's debatable, but it's not the most powerful thing in the world. You can't emulate everything, but everything it can do, I actually, can emulate. It's like the AdLib, Sound Blaster, old Tandy PCs that their own special sound, and it can emulate that. Before the Sound Blaster came out, Creative had a different sound card, which was really rare, called the Creative Music System. This could also emulate it. Roland had a MIDI interface called the MPU 401, and this can also emulate an MPU 401 in its kind of special intelligent mode, which a lot of later sound cards don't do right, or you need some kind of special software running on your PC. It doesn't work all the time. So yeah, it was like this weird project and kind of grew and grew and grew due to the fact I had some really early success. I'm a software developer. I've dabbled in hardware in the past. I knew enough to get my feet wet. Like I've soldered stuff before. I designed a PCB with a friend of mine, and he helped me out with that to kind of get me going. Like maybe 10 years before I started on this. Because it was just enough to plant that seed to like just start and get going and just start making this thing, and it actually worked out. And another big thing is open source. The open source community, there's so much hardware and software, mostly software, that's written to run on like modern computers. I can port that software to this little microcontroller, and I don't have to write everything from scratch. My job is to kind of strip it down and make sure it can run on something like this, and make sure it can run fast enough to react to all the signals in the computer. But I don't have to worry about like reverse engineering how the Gus worked, because someone already did that and open sourced all that work, so I could build off of it. That was another big thing that kind of kickstarted everything.
You use some acronyms that I think it might be worth kind of unpacking a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that everybody knows what the ISA bus or is, or what
Yeah.
it does, or how you can use it to expand the
Yeah.
functionality of a computer. It might be worth
Yeah,
diving
so
into.
the ISA bus, it stands for industry standard architecture. And that computer right there is the original IBM PC-AT. It was kind of the 286, what came up after that one on the top, the original IBM PC. That's the granddaddy that started it all. And the AT is the next generation. There was the XT in between, but that started like IBM defined this bus. Everyone else copied it, and it became an industry standard, and then eventually became this actual specified thing called the ISA bus. And so if you want to be able to make a card that plugs into an old computer, that is a PC kind of clone or derivative like that. It has to talk on the ISA bus. And yeah, like you said, it's this connector right here. There's these slots in it that plug in. And it's pretty well documented. There's weird kind of holes, and like I had to read like 5 different books and all like old Usenet discussions, and to figure out like how some certain things acted. Like the timing isn't always write from system to system because everyone had their own take on it because they were kind of copying IBM, and IBM did a little weird and they didn't really document it in their documents. So the way the other computers did it didn't exactly follow it. And it's a bit of a mess, but it's enough of a standard where, they sold so many of these cards and there's a lot of documentation around how to make something that can work on it.
Just want to remind folks that are in the webinar, if you have a question, pop it in the Q&A. That's the best way for us to see it and address it. People on YouTube or Facebook, obviously just use your comments there. But I have a question. You said that people sort of accuse you or say like, oh, that's like putting a supercomputer in a computer or whatever. But I remember one of the things you talked about was RAM. The Pico doesn't have that much RAM, even compared to the ancient Pico Gus. And how did you work around that?
Yeah. So on the actual RP2040 itself is like 264 kilobytes of memory, which like if you had a computer with 264K of memory in like 1994, it was a tiny amount. And it's here in 2024, it's still a tiny amount. And like on the original Gravis ultrasound, it had 1 megabyte of memory actually on the sound card, all to itself to store samples in. So like short recordings of instruments or sine waves or things like that. And if I wanted to be able to actually support everything that can play on a Gus, I need 1 megabyte of memory. But one thing that's really cool is this little chip right here is a PS RAM chip, pseudo static RAM. It's like this tiny little chip. There's 8 megabytes on it, and you can talk to it over SPI, which is a serial protocol bus that a lot of microcontrollers can talk. And it's a very standardized kind of thing. And it's fast enough to actually, get audio samples in real time to play high quality music. So that was a way to kind of push past the boundaries of this little constrained microcontroller. And
just looking around, I always have, 1,000 props at my disposal. I'm like, this little tiny pocket computer from 1992 had 2 meg in it. So yeah, 264 in 1991 was not much.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like there's no like audio output on the RP2040, so you have to add a DAC onto a digital analog converter. So yeah, there's a lot you have to do on top of just the the Pico itself.
But the Pico or the RP2040 is really shining in a lot of sort of retro and other interfacing projects because of the PIO. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was kind of the main thing that made me start using the RP2040 is the fact that Raspberry Pi added PIO to it, which stands for kind of programmable IO. And what it does is it lets you write these tiny little programs in kind of an assembly-like language where you have these little kind of commands saying, load the pins, wait for a pin to change to this value. And it's not, you don't have to wait for this stuff to happen on the CPU, on the actual CPU on the microcontroller. The PIO kind of does it for you in the background. And when it gets the data that it needs, it puts it into a little FIFO, little first in, first out kind of queue. It's like, I got data for you. And then, you get it interrupting your code and you can process it when you're ready. And it offloads so much. So you don't have to kind of bit bang, this kind of stuff. It lets you write these tiny little, cool little self-contained programs to input data, to output data. And what people have been able to do with it is amazing. And like, there's so many retro projects that use the RP2040 or the Pico now. It's kind of become the Swiss Army knife of interfacing with retro computers, which is really cool.
Almost out of time. Keith said, can we hear some sounds from it? We were actually backstage. A couple of us were like trying to get stuff to make sound because I got my Game Boy here and I had it plugged into my mixer and Zoom was filtering out the sound on that. And I don't think Ian was able to get much sound, but you want to give it a try?
Yeah, I'll give it a try. I'll turn on original sound for musicians and see. It's just going to play over my speakers.
We did try this beforehand and it didn't work well. So.
Yeah. Let's see here. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So it says a module player on a DOS computer. Yeah.
I can't believe how well it's working. When we tried it backstage, all there was like a little bit of the bass lines coming through, but no, pretty good. I went to a concert on Tuesday that sounded eerily similar to this. They the opening artist, Praga Khan, closed with the Mortal Kombat song live. It's insane.
That's awesome.
All right. That's all the time we have for Ian at the moment. But we'll get you back in for the second half. But thank you for sharing that. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And real quick, let's let you plug real quick. So Pico Gus, part of your kind of goal with it is to make this car that is available to people, that is affordable, that isn't $350 like the used one. So where can people get this?
Yeah, probably the best place now to go. So I sell them on my Tindy store, but there's also a few other people that sell them now. So I don't have to make them all. And also make them available in Europe. But the best place to go is you can just go to picog.us, Pico Gus, but picog.us. And that has links to all the places where you can buy it, and you can see photos of the card, and there's links to videos, and a lot of people reviewed the card. So yeah, that's the best place to jump off. And there's also links to my social media, Mastodon, where I post what I'm doing and hacking on with that.
Perfect. And yeah, if anyone else has questions, feel free to drop into the chat or join us later, and you can ask in person. There we go, pico.gs. That's that amazing vanity URL. Thank you so much, Ian.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Kat Gafam, who made the game that is actually featured on the cover. In fact, here's the Game Boy that's featured on the cover, the actual Game Boy, and somewhere, oh, here's Kat's game. And hi, Kat.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, so I made, this is the Game Boy Camera Gallery Mystery Show is the second game that I made in this potentially ongoing series, if I have the energy to make another one. The first one being the Game Boy Camera Gallery 2022.
This has been on the shelf in every live stream that I've ever done. I just realized it's actually been a little secret guest the whole time.
The name isn't quite as fun on that one, I think, as the most recent one. But yeah, I fell in love with the Game Boy Camera, which I will explain kind of what the Game Boy Camera is. It is a peripheral for the Game Boy. Yeah, and it works all the way up from the original DMG Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance. And yeah, you have an impressive collection. That is what an unmodified Game Boy camera looks like. It is a 0.01 megapixel digital camera, and it also has a really sweet swiveling camera head, which was like pretty revolutionary, which good pun. But that was released in 1998 for the original Game Boy, which was actually kind of late in the sort of cycle of consoles, because the Game Boy Color had already come out by the time that it was hitting the shelves in America. And it is strictly a 2-bit photo, so it only has a 4-tone color palette. And of course, with the DMG and the Pocket only being able to display grayscale, your images only can come out in grayscale, although people have figured out ways to create color images from it, which is pretty wild. Yeah, it was a very fun peripheral designed for kids. Their motto was funtography. That's sort of the idea of the creation. And it was sort of inspired off of the same philosophies of Mario Paint for the SNES, which is another game thing that I love, which was like very much like that edutainment type of like something where kids can be creative and make something, so parents will buy it for them, but it is also fun and has little weird mini games in it. And both of them actually have a music like track. They have like a chip tracker in it, and you can actually make music with both of them, which is crazy. Yeah, lots of weird little Easter eggs were snuck into the design of the software of it. Really bizarre choices I think they made, not all good ones. You had very limited ability of basically you could adjust the brightness and the contrast, I think, and that's it. So you couldn't focus. It was fixed focal length, and you're kind of at the whims of your environment and its limitations. But people have found a lot of ways around this because previously you could only get photos off of the cartridge if you had a Game Boy printer, which is just out of reach. I should have
mine's
had
on
that
the
ready.
shelf as well. It's like, oops, I brought so many things, but not the printer.
It's basically just a receipt printer, more or less, with special proprietary paper, because of course Nintendo would do that. But that would connect, that would interface with the Game Boy, and that was the only way that you could get photos off of it, and it could only hold 30 photos. So you would have to be deleting photos and kind of like printing them, and those prints fade. So there was like no great solution to save your photos long term. So people developed like virtual printers essentially, or I have the GBX cart, which is not just for the Game Boy camera, but basically you can flash or take the saves off of, or take the ROM off of cartridges, and you basically just like slot it in and like hook it up to your computer via USB and use the software. And it's pretty like simple. And they have a special interface for getting the photos off of it and viewing them. So that's like made it extremely easy to save your photos forever, which I think is part of the reason why there's a huge renaissance happening right now. I think also coinciding with just this general like revitalization of retro technology as millennials become older and we want the things from the 90s. I think, yeah, the prices for everything is just getting absolutely ridiculous. The used console market is just outrageous currently. So it can be hard to get your hands on a Game Boy camera right now, which is a bummer because actually people have found out ways around that too. I just forgot. People have created a completely new motherboard for with custom software that will you like solder the sensor and the lens of the Game Boy camera, so it's like essentially can just like live on even if like something happens to the motherboard.
And it squeezes it down to like a regular size cartridge too, right?
Yes, yeah. There's one project that I don't know what wizardry these people are using. I am not nearly smart enough to even understand the complexities of what they're doing. But yeah, they've essentially like 3D printed cartridge shells or different modifications for either hooking up lenses. Like I have this one where it has a 3D printed mount on it. If I can unscrew it. And that's the tiny little sensor right there. It takes, it shoots 128 by 112 pixel photos, 0.1 megapixels. And this is a CCTV lens, so a security camera lens, which is like the only sort of reasonably sized lens you can stick on here instead of having a regular like DSLR sized lens, which because the sensor is so small, the crop factor is crazy and it basically becomes a telescope because it zooms in so much and people can take photos of the solar system and then planets and stuff with it. And yeah, once I sort of fell down the rabbit hole and became obsessed, I wanted to like make something, contribute, do something, but I'm not smart enough to make mods. I'm not like, you know, a software engineer. I'm not, I don't really know a lot of like technical skills, but I do have a background in curatorial work. I was the exhibitions director for a gallery in Boston. I ran my own community art space before that. And I was like, oh, I wonder if somebody's made like a virtual exhibition type of game just for Game Boy camera photos that could be played on the Game Boy so that you can like view the photos on the original hardware. Because I'm all about that like physical media and like experiencing them in the way that they were intended. And no one had really made one. And my whole strategy in the 10 years that I've been attempting to have a career is to just find something that no one else has done. So when I do it, it can't be worse than other people's because there aren't other people's. And I wanted to make that and sort of share photos of the awesome Game Boy camera community, which mostly lives on the Game Boy Camera Club Discord. And yeah, I put together like, I think the first game had like 40 photos or something. And it just kept on like expanding and expanding. And I got way over my head because I didn't even know how to make pixel art. I didn't know anything about game development. I didn't understand like anything really about how to create a video game. But there's GB Studio, which is the engine that you can use to create Game Boy games very easily. It's an incredibly accessible game engine, as evidence of an idiot like me being able to make a game. And that went way better than I expected. It took me like hundreds of hours to make, and I expected nobody to care, and I was just bored during COVID, and I like learning new things. So I wasn't expecting.
I cared. I was 37 out of 100 to buy it, apparently.
I was not expecting even 100 people to buy it, but it sold like 200, and it was played a bunch of times on itch.io, and that went way better than I could have imagined. So I decided to make a second one, and I wanted to reimagine it sort of in a different style, a different genre, instead of kind of like reusing the same assets over again, which felt kind of like, I don't know, could have done that, but it didn't feel super exciting to me. So I created a game in the point and click style, which was a terrible idea. Certainly not doing that again. Because there's a reason why there's very little point and click games for the Game Boy, because it is not meant to do that. I had a very hard time with it, and I got way over my head, but I made something, and it's out.
It is out, and I just got mine the other day, and I'm just booting up. This is the Game Boy that was on the cover of the magazine, and it's almost impossible that we're ever going to be able to see this screen on here, but I promise you the game is on here and it's working, and you won't be able to hear the audio for the same reason that we had trouble earlier, but I'm playing it right now.
Yeah, basically it like follows the same sort of weird character I just sort of put in as like a placeholder that ended up being the playable character. And you are going through a haunted mansion run by like a weird raccoon character that showed up in the first game. And you were like invited because you're a journalist who's like reviewing the show. And then sort of as you go through the space, the intention was like you were kind of like led through story beats through all of the rooms in the exhibition, and by the end you have seen all of the photos and you get satisfaction that you completed it, and there's a cute little ending. And
is there any Easter eggs in this one? Because I know there's a couple
is.
secret ones. Awesome.
Nope, nobody's found it.
Oh, yeah. Absolute nightmare scenario. When I sent them I sent them my Game Boy and my cartridge to do the cover shoot, and it came back. Then they had decided that they wanted to start a new game. So I had unlocked every single thing in this one, and now I get the excitement of doing it over.
It's interesting going back and playing that after 2 years.
Yeah.
And I don't remember anything that I did, and I was like, oh yeah, I put like little weird obscure secrets, but currently no one has found, and I'm offering a bounty. If the first person that finds it can get a free copy of the physical game. And so
Awesome.
far,
Oh
no
yeah,
one
because
has
people are
proven
playing
it.
online on itch.io as well. So
Mhm.
I was like, wouldn't they already have a game? But yeah, I guess not necessarily.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
that was my lovely experience with Game Boy Camera. It was a great entry point into game development and working with like retro hardware in a really fun, hands-on way.
Awesome. I will drop, is catherinegrafam.com the best way for
Yes.
people to find you?
Yes.
I'll drop that into the chat, and we're about at time for Kat, but stick around for the after party, and you can ask Kat any questions there. And thank you, Kat.
Thank you so much.
Next up is Pablo. Pablo with the camera Lucida. Hi, Pablo.
Hi everybody.
Tell us about the camera Lucida. What is that? What is it?
Yeah, well, I'm super excited. I mean, the Make community is an incredible place, so I'm really honored to be here. Yeah, so I mean, before I came to Lucida, like I wanted to say, like I love to draw, and I have since I was a little kid. And as I grew up, I became more interested in like art and technology. The personal biographical thing is that I was born in 1975, and so when I was a college architecture student in my junior year, Netscape came out with its first browser. So like my relationship to technology was one where I was at that formative point in my life in college, learning analog drawing for architecture, but also kind of these couple of weird dudes with some computers in the basement trying like 3D modeling stuff in the mid 90s. And so I became really interested in that relationship between kind of old analog technology and emerging technologies. And what I became more interested in was that art and drawing in particular have these great rich analog histories with technology. But in the digital age, we kind of tend to forget those things. Either we think that digital stuff is novel and we kind of forget the other stuff, or the other stuff just kind of isn't useful as much anymore. So I've always been interested in that. But in 1999, 2000, David Hockney, the British artist, published this book. So it's Secret Knowledge. And in it, as you can see on the cover, he's using this kind of weird little device on a stick. And in it, he's talking a lot about how artists throughout history have used technologies that we kind of don't know about, particularly optical technologies. And on the cover there, he's got the camera lucida, but he also talks about camera obscura and lenses and mirrors and ways that artists kind of use this stuff to make realistic images, and that the history of art is a history of technology. And I'm like, absolutely, that is a great thesis, and you're putting it out there. But what I loved was he actually was saying, hey, I got these tools and I recreated this stuff. And I thought, that's really fascinating. I kind of want to do that too, because I also had never heard of a camera lucida. And so in the early 2000s, I managed to get one on eBay. So here's my first camera lucida. And it's hard to tell, but it's a beautiful chrome instrument from the late 19th century. And it's got this little prism on this adjustable stand, and this one comes with like accessories of lenses. And when you put it up at your eye and you look down into it, you see a ghost image of what's in front of you, like projected onto your paper. So it's not actually projected, but it's basically a beam splitter. So when you look down, you're seeing part of your vision goes to the subject and part of it goes to your paper. And guess what? You can also see your hand. So now you're actually tracing directly from real life. You're not actually kind of doing that thing that we all do if we want to draw. You have to look at the subject. Like right now, David, I'm looking at you, but then I look down to draw. I look up at you. I look down. I have to do that, right? And that's one of the big challenges that people have when they try to draw. You're never actually looking at your subject. So these tools were kind of brilliant for helping figure out, oh, I can kind of trace a little bit, get the proportions right, get these basic things down. And then since then, I bought some other kind of really beautiful ones. So this is a brass one from the 1820s. And I realized that by looking at them individually, they had different optics and different technologies that they were attempting to improve the technology for it. So, I got one like Hockney because I wanted to learn to draw with it. And so like, here's the very first drawing I ever did with it. And you can see it's not super fantastic, but it has the hallmarks of kind of tracing something. And then over time, I got practiced it and I got a little better at it. So I'm not showing off, but I do like to draw. These are my daughters from about 5 years ago. you know,
Okay.
and I have a lot of technique stuff that I know. So it's like I adapted my technique to this tool. So what's interesting is there's also a history of it. And I write about it in the Make article that the technology was very popular from 1807 until the 1860s or so. And there were some people who were kind of incredible. So this is Sir John Herschel, British scientist. And to show you, he did kind of incredible drawings. This is my show and tell instead of doing a screen share. But you can see he did these drawings of kind of traveling around Europe and doing these incredible drawings. And the story goes that he's on holiday in Italy with his friends, and he's doing his incredible drawings. And his buddy is like, I want to try that too, and he's terrible. His drawings are just not great, and he admits it. He's like, this is terrible. I wish there was a way that I could take that image that's really beautiful and put it directly on the paper without me having to draw it. And that was William Henry Fox Talbot. And over the next 10 years, he uses that inspiration to invent photography. So create basically like chemical process to fix images onto paper with Herschel's help. And as a result, it created this incredible like revolution in imaging, but it also meant that camera lucida became less and less important. You know, the camera lucida had to die so that photography could live. And what I found interesting in looking at the history of it is it never truly died. It just morphed in its uses. So I love that I have some of these retro toys from the 1950s. So this is the See and Draw copier, you know, so it's like, it's the same device. It's just, you know, a toy that you would see in the back of magazines and pulp stuff. So this is the device here. It's just a piece of mirror and glass. It's very terrible optics, but I love the kind of weird retro advertising for it, like draw the first day, no talent needed. And the suggestion, like, you know, there's like attractive people that you're going to get close to you because you can draw them and stuff. So this is all like 1950s stuff. Now, about a little over 10 years ago, I was teaching at Carnegie Mellon and I had a conversation with my colleague, Golan Levin, and we wanted to bring this art technology conversation to students. And so on a strange idea, we're like, well, what if we could make a cheaper one that was a lot easier to get? Because as you saw, these things are very fussy. And so we went on Kickstarter with an idea that there's a new camera lucida, a neo lucida. And we took it to Kickstarter, and as you can see by my little poster back here, we were funded. Now, the surprising thing was that trying to raise 15,000, we raised almost 500,000. And so it was this very strange thing where people were really expressing how much they wanted to learn to draw, and that a tool like this might be able to be helpful. And since then, I've made more versions. So here's the Neo Lucida XL, which has mirror and glass, and the newest one from last year, the Neo Lucida Plus. And here are the devices. So the Plus, you know, it's a gooseneck and a clamp with the optics kind of right in there on an anodized aluminum piece, and it's all slick and simple, easy to use, exactly the same optics that they used 200 years ago. But the best part is that this year, being able to actually give everybody a chance to make their own, because the optics on some of these are pretty simple. So when you look down, the simplest version is mirror and glass, right? So you have a mirror here and a piece of glass. And when you look down, part of your reflection goes into the mirror and out to your subject. Part of it goes through the glass. And because it bounces twice, your image is right side up. So for all of that tech, it's really this, right? Here's a piece of mirror, and here's a piece of glass. Now, this glass is teleprompter glass. So it's partially reflective and partially clear. So you have some light transmission that allows you to have that crisp reflection. So here's the fun part. I barely tried it, but we're going to try it now. I have it set up right here in my studio. So we're going to try a live demo of exactly how this works. Okay, so first I'm going to flip my camera around. Hopefully I can do that. Here we go. Okay. So I have it set up here. This is the exact one that I showed in Make magazine. It's an MDF box with the glass and mirror, and I put it on some adjustable stand. I have my good old fashioned art, anatomic model skull, and then I've got my paper and pencil down below. So if I can get this to hover just right over the eye hole, see if I can find it. Where is it? Live TV. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
So now you can see. Now I can't draw from here because it's really hard to see. But as you can see, like I can follow the contours of the skull. And this is a live image I'm just seeing right here, as well as what's in front of me up here. And then you can make that drawing directly from real life. And the nice thing is that the setup is a very portable thing. So in this case, it's a very simple MDF box that I've just clamped onto an adjustable arm that you can get almost anywhere. And because it's clamped to a table, you could put it on an easel or some kind of portable table, take it outside and actually make the drawing that way. So let me bring myself back to myself. There we go. Yeah, so you know, I encourage people to try it. I think there's something about this idea that you can draw, you know, rethink the way that you think about drawing. So if you draw already, you know, here's a way to think about drawing in a way that you probably haven't been used to. And if you're learning to draw, this is one of those tools that historically has been there to help you get some of those tricky parts of drawing realistically, how to get those parts right. Right? Foreshortening and perspective and composition and like looking away from your paper, all these things are really getting in the way and make people very frustrated. So with a little bit of luck, this Make Magazine article will help people not only draw more, but actually figure out how to make these things too, and actually bring them into their practice in some really fun and interesting ways. And I encourage everybody watching, you know, post your results if you decide to make one of these, because I really want to see what people do when they get drawing with these technologies.
Gorgeous. I love it. I'm curious. So I am not any kind of artist at all. But one thing that I seem to be strangely good at for reasons that I can't explain is sidewalk chalk. So if I like look at a picture of Kirby, I can just kind of like draw Kirby like pretty recognizably. And so I'm curious, like,
wow,
would it be easy to like scale this up? Like what would be required in order to do a pretty large surface like that?
It's actually it's one of the things that it really can't do very well, because if you could see the form factor, like you have to get above it and like look down into the prism. Now, the higher you make the eyepiece over the paper, like a projector, right? The farther away the projector goes, the larger the image becomes. But then you have to, yeah, basically. So I did a demo. I made a video of it where I took like a 1 meter stick and I took a pencil at the end of it, got on a ladder, and like, you know, so you could do it, but you'd have to do this strange physical performance of like getting on stilts or like having these long pencils. But that's the other beauty of it. There are not, you know, these optics are super, super simple. There's no distortion, there's no lens. It's literally what you see. And so you could create like a wide angle and some other stuff if you wanted to. But yeah, effectively, the distance to your subject and the distance to your paper is what determines the size. In fact, if you put the subject equidistant to your paper, you make a 1-to-1 copy, right? So if you wanted to make a perfect copy of Kirby from that thing that's like, you know, 3 inches high, and you put that picture up on your screen, it's the same distance as to your paper, you have a perfect 3-inch Kirby.
I think you're implying that my picture of Kirby wasn't already perfect, but okay, I definitely.
But now you can make many copies of your perfect Kirby.
I can draw the perfect one and then duplicate my perfect one. Yeah.
Exactly. In an almost ridiculously analog way that you're going to redraw them each time.
Of a digital video game character that isn't even.
But that's the beauty of where we are now. Like analog and digital can do whatever they want with each other, just for the fun of it. Why not?
Well, I'm pretty sure most of these records behind me are also like vinyl records of video game bleepy bloop noises as well. So it's where it's going. We got about a minute left. If anyone has any questions, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A. Please use the Q&A if you can. Jamie, I don't know if we're getting anything in from Facebook or YouTube. Jamie's telling me something. She says nothing from Facebook or YouTube. Okay.
That's
well,
fine.
then I dropped a link into the chat, neolucida.com. Is that the best way for people to find out more about you and your project?
Yeah, so that has not only a way to buy them if you want, but also there are some sections on history and some of the background on it if you wanted to learn more about some of the stuff I talked about today. So basically some educational resources are there as well.
Beautiful. And if you do come up with any questions.
Oh no, and pablogarcia.org if you're interested in the stuff that I do, but neolucida. Hey, well, somebody already bought one.
We've already made a sale, so yeah, let's we're moving the needle.
Oh, fantastic. I love it.
Incredible. We are kind of out of time, but let's get Wilbert's question real quick since we were fishing for questions. Are you making any other historical art tools?
I don't, not for sale, but I do, and you can't see the studio so much, but I have a collection of other drawing technologies that I do research and recreate for educational purposes. Like I make a version of it so that I can test exactly how it works. I do have like some pantographs here
Oh,
that I'm
yeah.
kind of like doing some stuff on. So I don't make them to sell, but I am. You can check out drawingmachines.org is my site where I'm compiling a lot of history of drawing technologies. So I don't make them to sell, but I love making them and encouraging others to share stuff that they make with drawing machines and technologies.
I saw a
Thanks for the
fascinating
question.
thing the other day, similar to that, where it was basically how they did kind of lettering, where they actually just traced like a lettering, thing here, and then it did the pantograph thing to actually with the real pen in it or whatever. They're, oh my God, what a scam. Wilbur also says your art is awesome. So
thank you, Wilbert.
we'll have
I
the
appreciate that.
customer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Pablo. And we've got plenty of time for more questions after we have David Bettino on, who's going to be telling us how to jam polyphonic audio into all kinds of interesting objects, I think. I can't see you, David. Can you hear me or see me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great, but I can't see you.
Let me redo my camera here.
It was all working fine backstage.
It was.
Oh, something's happening. We're getting sort of a loading. And the loading has stopped moving.
Oh, this is delightful.
Yeah.
Let me try one. This is an audio presentation, so imagine that something is happening.
We spent all that time trying to get the audio to come through Zoom, and we lost the video in the process, apparently.
I'm going to unplug my camera and plug it back in.
Okay. In the meantime, let me entertain people with my attempt to make the Game Boy camera work over Zoom. Let's see what happens with that. I thought this would be a fun party trick if I could get it to happen. I have the Japanese version of this game. I don't really know what the... Hey. Oh, David, you're back. I can stop stalling.
Right on.
All right. Hooray.
Hey, well, yeah, greetings, everyone. I'm so psyched to be here. This is my second article for Make in the recent era. My previous one in issue 88 was about making end tables out of cutting boards. So it's just wonderful that there's this community that pulls together so many different types of creativity. And kind of on the retro theme, I think one of my very first articles for Make, some of the old timers might recognize this guy. Let's see if he focuses. This was a MIDI data detector. So MIDI goes in and oh, there you go. His mechanical eye will flash a little bit. This was from issue 7 of Make, so you can see how long I've been gone. Later on, so I guess a wee bit of background first. I grew up playing piano and French horn and singing. And then when I got to college, I got into electronic music. And we had this fabulous electronic music program at Oberlin. There's a whole conservatory of music. And even though I was a philosophy major, I could go over there and use the studio as much as I wanted. And what I discovered was that normally as a musician, you're kind of playing other people's music or you're playing your own music, but you've got a certain type of sound. When you're into synthesizers, you can basically create your own instrument. And every time you create a new sound on a synthesizer, it's as if you've created a new instrument. You have to learn how to play it. It's got a personality. It's got a new type of expression. And so that was a wonderful challenge to think about, not just the notes, but also the sounds. So after a while, this guy came back. So he was already flashing his eye. I found a tiny chip, this little 8-pin microprocessor called the DSP-G1. Adafruit was selling them for a while, and it's the most horrible sounding. Ian was talking about this earlier. There's some filtering on the output of most sound cards, but not this one. this is the raw sound from the chip. I've got a resistor and a capacitor jammed in there to make sort of a low pass filter. But let me see if you can hear this.
Not getting it.
Can you hear that?
I couldn't hear that one. What was that's not the same as the one we were doing earlier, right? That was the
No, this is a different one. It should sound like a horrible screeching cat. But anyway, that was my first entry into polyphonic synthesizers that you could buy for $20 or so and stick into the creature of your choice.
I'm just curious, David, for context. We mentioned at the school lab, what kind of gear did they have there? Like, what era is this? Is this like early Akai samplers or like free samplers or like what
No, this was like quadraphonic tape loops. So a giant Moog 55 system, ARP 2600, VCS 3s like Pink Floyd used on Dark Side of the Moon.
Awesome.
We had a Buchla system. So all the different flavors of analog at that time. And then while I was there, we started getting in some digital gear. We got some DX7s and MIDI was coming out. And MIDI was just an amazing opportunity to be able to layer sounds together and control things and then edit them. I don't know if the ultrasound Gravis was using MIDI. It probably was, in addition to the mod stuff.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so the next stage in my making your own instrument evolution, I got this board. I should say that a lot of my projects start kind of backwards from the case. So I was browsing around the internet one day and I found this guy. He didn't have the buttons on at the time, but this was called the Bay Pig Radio. And it kind of gained some internet fame as finding on a list. It fell on a list that was something like 10 tech items never to buy your Valentine. So it was a radio, but it sounded absolutely awful. At the time I got it, the ears were the like channel changing buttons, and there's this little tail here that would change the volume. So for years and years, I thought, what could I put in here that would make it more interesting? First thing I did was I got a 555 chip and made a little oscillator.
That's coming through.
All right. And then from SparkFun, I bought this board that almost fills up the entire pig. This is the Robert Sonic's SparkFun Tsunami, which is this wonderful, interesting board with something like 16 trigger inputs. And all you have to do is you wire up a button to each one, and then you can decide later what they do. And so that was a real revelation for me, as before that my projects were kind of all hardware based, but now they had some software components, so I could put the buttons where they felt nice to me, and then later on determine what they would do. And so kind of picking up on the theme, there's one button here that plays Pink Floyd's Pigs, of course. That's just my demo.
We just got one weird sound out of there. I don't know.
And then you can kind of decide what other things do, like the this left ear will do random sound bites about pigs and pork products.
You a farm boy? You remember this sound?
The vocal comes through great.
Right ear will do random pig and barnyard sounds.
Okay.
Kind of continuing the pork product theme, the buttons here did something that I'd always wanted to do, which is take a long recording of a vocal sample, in this case, transcriptions of spam email, and then trigger them. So the green button will start the phrase, the red button will pause it, and then the yellow button will resume it.
It was a Monday like every other when Sean Johnson showed up for his morning shift at the Marriott Hotel. He worked at the valet parking for over 3 years.
So this is just spam you've received and then put through text-to-speech into the pig?
Exactly, yeah. And the thing about spam emails is they're this wonderful connection of weird poetry and absolute greed. So it's just a real deep trough for
Wow.
making sounds.
Deep trough for the pig.
And it's also I don't have it plugged in at the moment, but it's got a MIDI jack as well, so you can play it from the keyboard. It is polyphonic. You can play chords, your response to velocity, controllers for changing the attack and the decay and things like that. So that was object number 2. But then I found another case that I thought was going to be really cool, and this is kind of a sad story to it. I think this is the Takata Face Bank, and what it is, it's like a coin bank. There's a little coin slot in the bottom. Pop that open, and you there's a proximity sensor embedded right here. So you turn it on and you wave kind of near it, and the lips start flapping, and it's got this really kind of creepy face, and it just freaked people out. So I started seeing these YouTube videos where people are saying, "What's inside a face bank?" But instead of deconstructing it and looking at it with care, they were smashing it with hammers. And I thought, well, this guy's got he's got a personality. He's got something to say to the world. Maybe he should be talking. So that's where Soundbite came in. So this guy has what the board that I wrote about in the magazine, the Waver, WVR, and that's like it was inspired by the tsunami, or the earlier version of the tsunami, but it's a fraction of the size, about half the price, and it does way more musical things in a lot of ways. Like as a keyboardist, you can do things like, do I have this hooked up? Plug it in for a sec. It'll layer samples. So I don't have it set up on this sound, but it'll hold up to 32 layers. So you could have a recording of a drum getting progressively louder, and as you hit the key harder, it'll trigger different drum sounds for more realism. You can have, of course, a different sound in each note. The inventor of the Waver, Andrew March, is just fantastic for taking feedback on GitHub and adding new features. And he's added, a bunch of ones that I suggested, like the I'm playing a little drum loop now.
Oh, the drum loop's not coming through. How do we get those weird vocals that we had before?
Okay, let's see. Try this one.
Oh, it's not coming through.
That's that some hot chick has moved in next door. That's right, jealous. I've got a new neighbor.
That's coming through.
There's more of this on my Instagram and YouTube channels. But see, I guess the next cool thing about this, let me just pop open. Earlier I showed on the blue one, the coin chamber. I was able to fit the entire Waver board inside the coin chamber on this guy. So that leaves a lot of room inside for all the levers and whatnot that operate the rubbery lips. And then there's another one, even smaller case. This is Birdon, one of Ultraman's nemesis. And this is from a series of Bandai vinyl creatures, and they're wonderful because they all split apart and you can pop them open. There's all kinds of room for electronics inside. So again, he's got a MIDI input on the back. It's powered by USB, and then there's a little aperture in the bottom where the sound comes out.
Nice.
So that's another Waver. That one was so small that I played it on an airplane tray table with little headphones, of course, and a USB battery pack.
Amazing. We've got a couple minutes. I wanted to give. We're technically out of time, but I wanted to give you a couple minutes back for the technical issues that we had up front. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A. I dropped a link to the WVR GitHub, and also to batmosphere.com as good places to find out more about some of the stuff that you've talked about. Is there anything else we want to share?
Oh yeah, reminded me, the blue guy, which we see in the article, is another interesting application. Let me plug him in here. I don't know if you can see it. This has a Hall effect sensor, actually two Hall effect sensors. They're magnetic sensors. On the bottom of the fidget spinner, I super glued a few magnets. So as it flips around his head, it'll trigger his lights, his eyeballs to flash. And then on the back, there's a 5-volt output. So what that means is you have a pulse that's controlled by a fidget spinner and has this really organic retard slowing down. And I use that to control a drum machine and a synthesizer playing an arpeggio. So I gave it a little spin and it goes ding, 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 like that. So I posted this on Instagram a while back, and I think a couple of weeks ago it had passed 1 million views. There is just so much putting things with, putting electronics into things with faces just seems to be a wonderful way to get people to pay attention and to enjoy what they're doing. And so that's been really my mission, is to let people, put musical instruments into fun enclosures, take away the stigma of feeling like you need to be a musician and know keyboard or guitar or drums, whatever, and just have fun exploring music and sound.
Well, we're almost at time, but we're almost out of time. But I'm curious if you have any other enclosures in mind what's your next target? What's your next victim?
I found I realized that banks are good because they've got a lot of space inside. So I found another wacky bank with rubbery flapping lips and rolling eyes. And that one is set aside for a speech synthesizer. It's like an old 8-bit speak and spell type of module called the MIDI narrator from rarewaves.net. And so that's in pieces right now, but that'll be going into the case, and then I'll have a third face, and I can maybe set up a little chorus or something.
I don't know if you can see it up here, but just right there's a automaton. A good automaton.
I thought of making one of those.
That, but this is marginally less insane.
I mean, but like on a very basic level, like I had this problem when they came out with the 3.5 millimeter MIDI spec. They couldn't agree if it was tip or ring on the jack that was going to be the signal. So I made this little guy. So MIDI goes in here. You flip the switch, and it's A or B coming out there. Of course, you could make it a lot smaller, but that just wouldn't be as cool now, would it?
Incredible.
So, yeah, and I guess the biggest challenge is that in the era I was in Japan, Bandai made these nice big monsters, but now they're about this tall. So the electronics are going to have to shrink a lot more for me to continue this hobby.
Awesome. Thank you, David. So